Die Hard is often remembered as one of the greatest action movies ever made. But what makes it so rewatchable isn't just the explosions, shootouts, or one-liners. The film is packed with details that quietly build the story, reveal character motivations, and even predict what is going to happen later. Many of them are easy to miss because the movie moves so quickly, but once you notice them, Die Hard becomes much more carefully constructed than it first appears. Here are 15 details you may have completely missed. When McClane arrives in Los Angeles, the movie immediately establishes that his biggest problem isn't Hans Gruber. His marriage is already falling apart. He has flown across the country because Holly chose her career over their life together, and he is clearly uncomfortable even being in the building. That matters because the hostage situation forces McClane to fight for more than survival. The entire night becomes a physical version of the emotional battle he has been avoiding. He is separated from Holly, unable to reach her directly, and forced to prove that he still belongs in her life. The terrorists create the external conflict, but McClane's real motivation begins before the first shot is fired. The building isn't just a convenient location. Its complicated structure is what makes the entire story possible. The unfinished floors, ventilation shafts, elevators, staircases, and security rooms create a maze where McClane can disappear while the terrorists struggle to find him. Hans has control of the building, but he never has complete control of the space. McClane uses the architecture to turn a heavily armed hostage situation into a game of pursuit, constantly moving through areas where the terrorists cannot easily follow. The building therefore creates the central advantage that keeps McClane alive. He knows how to hide inside a place Hans believes he controls. Hans Gruber and John McClane appear completely different, but the movie keeps connecting them. Both are intelligent, adaptable, confident, and capable of reading people. Hans uses planning and psychological manipulation, while McClane relies on improvisation. Neither behaves like a conventional action hero or villain. The crucial difference is that Hans believes everything can be controlled through planning, while McClane survives because he constantly adapts when plans fail. That becomes the philosophical conflict of the movie. Hans trusts the plan. McClane trusts himself. Hans repeatedly assumes that McClane is simply an inconvenience who can eventually be eliminated. That mistake comes from his original understanding of the situation. He prepared for police response, security systems, and frightened hostages. But he didn't prepare for a barefoot New York detective who refuses to behave predictably. Every time Hans adapts to McClane, McClane changes the situation again. The terrorist leader has a perfect plan for the building, but no plan for a man who keeps breaking the rules of the game. One of the most famous details in the movie appears before McClane even knows he will need it. Argyle's advice to relax by wiggling his toes seems insignificant at first, but it becomes essential once McClane loses his shoes and has to move through the building barefoot. The detail makes the later pain feel like more than a random obstacle. McClane was already dealing with physical tension before the attack began, and the movie turns a tiny piece of casual advice into something he desperately depends on later. Hans doesn't simply control people with weapons. He controls what they believe. He uses the false identity of the terrorists, manipulates police communication, stages appearances, and constantly creates misleading explanations for what is happening inside the building. His greatest weapon is uncertainty. The police outside never know how many terrorists there really are or what Hans actually wants. Even the hostages don't understand the full situation. McClane succeeds because he slowly collects information that Hans doesn't realize he is revealing. The arrival of federal agents looks like progress because more powerful law enforcement has finally taken control. But the opposite happens. The FBI approaches the situation according to procedure, while Hans has already studied how authorities are likely to respond. Their confidence gives him another opportunity to manipulate the situation. McClane, meanwhile, has already learned that following the normal rules is dangerous. The movie repeatedly contrasts bureaucratic certainty with McClane's improvisation. The people with the most authority often understand the situation the least. Sergeant Al Powell isn't just the friendly cop on the radio. His character mirrors McClane because both men are carrying guilt connected to a shooting. Powell has stopped carrying his weapon because he believes his past mistake defines him. McClane is also dealing with guilt, especially about the collapse of his marriage. The difference is that McClane is forced back into action, while Powell is forced to confront the fear that has been controlling him. Their relationship works because each man helps the other recover from something he cannot fix alone. McClane's feet becoming covered in broken glass isn't just a way to make the action more painful. It changes the way he moves through the movie. He becomes slower, more exhausted, and increasingly desperate. Every step hurts, which makes his later decisions feel more extreme because he is operating while physically deteriorating. His injuries also reinforce one of the film's most important ideas. McClane isn't an invincible superhero. He survives because he keeps going after the body has every reason to stop. Christmas is everywhere in Die Hard, but it does more than create a memorable atmosphere. The holiday reinforces the central theme of separation and reconciliation. McClane is visiting his family during a season associated with going home, yet he is trapped inside a building because the family he came to see is emotionally divided. Hans repeatedly dismisses Christmas traditions, while McClane uses them to communicate and survive. Even the famous messages written on the hostage's sweatshirt turn the holiday setting into part of the story. The movie is an action thriller built around people trying to get home. Hans is at his most powerful when he is unseen. He controls information, speaks calmly, and gives orders from a distance. But when he encounters McClane face to face and pretends to be an escaped hostage, the dynamic changes. For the first time, Hans has to improvise without knowing exactly who he is dealing with. McClane also fails to recognize Hans, creating one of the film's smartest moments of dramatic irony. Each man is standing directly in front of his greatest threat without realizing it. Hans understands that the police want to end the hostage situation as quickly as possible, so he gives them exactly the scenario they expect. The fake rescue operation turns their confidence against them. When the authorities think they have finally found the right moment to attack, Hans is already waiting. This sequence shows why he is so dangerous. He doesn't defeat the police through superior firepower alone. He makes them believe they are winning before he destroys their advantage. Holly's watch seems like a simple corporate gift, but it becomes one of the most important objects in the entire movie. Hans is obsessed with taking control of the situation, yet the watch represents the opposite. The personal life Holly has built without McClane. When Hans grabs it from her, he unknowingly gives McClane the final physical clue he needs. McClane realizes that Hans's escape plan depends on taking Holly with him, and that gives him one last chance to stop him. Something introduced as a symbol of Holly's new life becomes the reason Hans loses his. Hans falling from the building is memorable because McClane uses the same watch he tried to steal. But the scene also completes the movie's emotional argument. Hans believes people can be reduced to assets and plans. Holly is simply another useful hostage. McClane sees her as a person he refuses to lose again. When he removes the watch, he is literally tearing apart the object that represents the life separating them. The action climax therefore becomes a relationship climax at exactly the same moment. The biggest detail of Die Hard is that John McClane is almost the opposite of the typical action hero. He is tired, injured, frightened, stubborn, and constantly making mistakes. He complains, panics, improvises, and barely survives several situations that should kill him. That is precisely why audiences believe him. McClane doesn't win because he is stronger than the terrorists. Hans has more weapons, more men, better resources, and a better plan. McClane wins because he refuses to behave like someone who has already lost. Every advantage he gains comes from observing, adapting, and continuing after the situation becomes unbearable. That's what makes Die Hard more than an action movie. Hans Gruber believes the perfect plan can control everything. McClane proves that sometimes the person willing to keep adapting is more dangerous than the person who planned for everything. And after all these years, that's why the movie still works. Hans had the plan. McClane had nothing left to lose. McClane